Hey everyone, this is Jonas from Islandworks, having some garage time this weekend again. Lately I've been pretty consumed by my house renovation, which is driving me pretty much crazy. Nevertheless, it is finishing up, which is good because then I can spend more time on my favorite project. Last episode we were looking at the JRC Proactive suspension, which was cool and turned out really nice. I made a commitment at the end of that episode that this time I would get back to building the engine, which we will do today. We will look at the cylinder heads, we will look at the selection of camshafts, valves, rockers, retainers, whatever they're called, how I have gone through the process of this, and how we rebuild these heads. So have a look at that. Before we get started, I wanted to thank all my fellow viewers here for the feedback I got from the last episode with how to integrate the VCU, the vehicle control unit, into the armrest area there of the car, moving the circular connector to the side and so on. I got a little bit further on that. This is how it looks right now. It's just about done right now. I think it turned out a lot better. Do comment if you have some opinions or feedback about this. So, cylinder heads then, right? In one of my previous episodes, I disclosed that there had been a very, very big party in one of my cylinder heads that turned out like this. The unfortunate thing was that I was not invited to this party because I was obviously driving the car. I don't know when this happened with the car. I have some ideas. I have pretty good ideas on why it happened as well. Nevertheless, I will need to fix this to be able to put this together. So we're going to cover some of the procedures with fixing the cylinder heads today, and then assemble the cylinder heads and hopefully get them back on the engine. Okay, so cylinder head it is, and let's have a look at the details of this. So this is a nicely newly refurbished cylinder head. We can see on the intake port side here that it is beautifully CNC ported. This is done by a company up in the woods of Sweden called Halvarsson Racing. They're very good. They have this machine so that all of the port jobs get completely exactly the same. So really nice. I have new guides in this one, and if we look a little bit closer at this one, we can see that there is a little thing there that is called a cylinder guide, which is the thing that holds the valve. Right, so the valve is operating like this in a cylinder head, and it's important that the clearance between the valve and this cylinder, the valve guide, that this is pretty tight so that the valves don't move around too much, because then they might break or do something even worse than that. When I'm going to reassemble this, I have two spare heads that I'm going to use. Those are brand newly refurbished, so nice, just like this one. Then I'm going to reuse 4 of the other heads. As I examine my cylinder heads, I can see that they have been running with very hot exhausts, and I know this. I know that my engine was running hot. It's my fault. I had made some mistakes with my ignition map and things like that. So when I look at my exhaust valve guide, it's difficult for you to see. It is a little bit kind of burnt in the edges there, and as I take an exhaust valve and put it in there, I feel that the clearance in this one is not exactly what I'm used to feeling it as. So I'm going to replace my exhaust valve guides on these 4 cylinder heads that is going to be reused. So how do you do that? So the valve guide is something that looks like this. It's brass, right? It sits with a press fit into the cylinder head. So you need to either heat the head and cool this one, or do something else to get it in there. And it sits there and it's brass, so it's got a natural nice bearing on the valve here, so nice. What are we going to do to get the valve guide out of the cylinder head? Because as we look at it, we see that it is inclined in about this direction, right? So I tried to do something to fix this. I printed a piece. It's pretty thick and sturdy. It's really dense, the piece. And this one has the same kind of recesses here as the cylinder has. So if I take this guy here and I take the cylinder head, we can see that these fit on top of each other. And then I found a number on Renlist, which was the inclination angle of the exhaust valve, because it's different on the exhaust and the intake. So this only fits for the exhaust. And I made it that angle. So what this then means is that if I take this and I put some screws in there, so this 3D printed tool piece that I made here, it has threads in it. So I can take two screws in it like this so that it sits. Then if I just do a very non-scientific measure here, I can see that this looks very straight, right? So if I now have this straight, then I can just, no, it's not supposed to go like that. Some people do try to do that or put it in a press and press it out and they damage it. So that's not very cool. So the idea here is that you're supposed to drill it out, right? So if I put this in a drill, I drill it out, and as it becomes very thin, I can bang it out. So let's have a go at that. Okay, here we go. So I'm by my drill in my little auxiliary man cave here, where I have some extra cool tools. I have put the little jig here, and as I put a little level gauge on top of the valve here, I could see that it was not 100%. So I put a little paper under it here. I don't know if I've made something wrong in the design. If anyone out there knows the exact angles of the two valves in the cylinder head, do let me know so I can update this model as I put it out on the web page if anything needs to be adjusted. So nevertheless, I put a drill that is exactly the size of this hole, just to see that it clears perfectly. It does. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this drill out and I'm going to put another one in. The drill that I'm going to put in is a 12 millimeter drill that my friend Martin lended me. It has a little machine off tip there that is about 9 millimeters. So since I'm using the 993 valves, this is 8 millimeter. The tip there is 9. I'm going to see if this works. If this doesn't work, I'll have to go to the workshop and have a look there. So here goes nothing. Okay, so this now means that it's completely drilled out and I have a little ridge there on the bottom. So we go up to my favorite friend here, the press. And I've just put an M10 bolt in there. We're gonna see now if we gently can press this guide out. Don't want to use too much pressure because the thing we're pushing against is not very hard and it's moving immediately. I don't know if you can see that in the video there, but it's coming out really nicely. So this method means you print one of these, you align that, you drill the guide out, and then you just press it out. And I think this is very, very harmless for the cylinder heads to do it in this manner, and it's less expensive than giving it to a fancy workshop. There we go. So there we have the guide. You can see the tip of it was burnt off a little bit. Yeah, good stuff. And here we go. The guide is completely out and there's absolutely no damage to anything. So Happy that I figured this method out. As I said, I'm gonna put the file for this one, for the exhaust side, on my webpage. So if anyone has pleasure of this, do send me a note. And let's get on to assembling the heads. Okay, valve train. Let's have a look at the valve train. So I'm gonna try to explain a little bit how the pre-tension of the springs is selected and how the dynamics, how that works. So let's look at the camshaft first. Camshaft turns right. As the camshaft turns, we have the rockers, they follow. What's important here? What's important is that you don't want to have this guy, as this one is turning, to kind of shoot off and then make contact, because this will damage both of these surfaces. That's one area. The other area that is maybe more intuitive is where this elephant foot, where that pushes on the valves. You want to make sure that as it pushes the valve down, that the valve doesn't continue like this, right? You want to make sure that the spring rate and the weight of this valve is adjusted so that it follows here all the way. If not, you get a phenomenon called valve floating, and that means that the valves, they actually don't close when they're supposed to, because the rocker arm pushes it down, and when it does so, it loads this mass with inertia, so that it moves down and then moves up, so it doesn't close the valve. Right? I created a little thing here to try to symbolize how this works. Right? So this is a little bit of a rocker arm here, and what this is supposed to symbolize is the weight up here. This is the weight of the valve train. Right? The heavier it is, the more inertia it is. This rubber band here is actually the spring. Right? So let's say I go for a modest configuration. Normal valves, not very heavy springs, not very aggressive cams, not very high RPM. Then it operates like this. Right? Everything follows nicely. Then all of a sudden I start revving up to 8,000 RPM. This one doesn't close anymore. Right? It doesn't go all the way in between every time, because this one is pushing so much and so often that it doesn't have time to come in. That's called valve floating. Right? And your power dies when that happens. If I take this rubber band and do it another lap, as I did here, then you can run much higher, because now the spring is much harder, so it pushes in. That's good, but it causes more friction. So you don't want to have that as your only solution to this. The thing you could do as well is to make the valve train lighter. Right? So if I now make the valve train lighter, it follows much nicer. I don't know if this way of explaining makes sense, but the point here is that you want your valve train to be as light as possible, right? You want it to have springs and preloading of the springs that matches the mass of the valve train, as well as how aggressive your cam is. Right? And the RPM, your maximum RPM that you select. Because a higher maximum RPM, okay, then you shoot your valves away at a higher speed and they have to come back. Right? If they're heavier, then they stay away a little bit longer before they come back. So, what are the alternatives for a Porsche 964? So, let's go valves first. This is a 964 standard valve. This one has a 9mm stem. Right? This is a 993 valve. It has an 8mm stem. So this one is 10% lighter than this. And when it comes to mass in these circumstances, that is a lot. So valves, going from 964 to 993, we save 10%. Right? That's about 10 grams. It's very small weights, but you know, 8,000 RPM, that's 4,000 times a minute that valve shoots out. It becomes very large forces for these as you do that. Next thing is springs, right? 964 springs, they weigh, was it 60 grams something? And the Schrick springs weighs 55. So you only count half of the weight when it comes to valve train on springs, but still it's a few grams. The Schrick springs that I'm using, they are also about 10-15% stiffer, which makes all the difference when you're going to rev more, right? So springs, another thing. The other one is the top washers on the valve train. This is steel, 19 grams. This is titanium, it is 10 grams. So this is almost as much weight saving as in the valves. So big, really important. Last, possibly least, I don't know, is the rocker arms, right? This is it looks casted. Yeah, it's some kind of casted thing from the original one. 140 grams. This is Pauter, US made, forged, really nice. It's just above 100 grams. So we have 30-40% difference. This one does miss the elephant foot, so I need to account a little bit for that. But it is a huge difference. Look at the difference in thickness on these. It's a completely different beast. And this one is stronger, lighter, and it looks mighty fine. So what have we learned with this excursion then? Well, we've learned that the 993 had a better set of valves than the 964. It makes quite a big difference. We've also learned that stiffer springs is a good thing because it makes sure that you have that contact. And that the little titanium retainer, this makes almost as big of a difference as the valves when it comes to the weight, because that retainer actually goes back and forth all the time, right? So it has a direct impact. The RPM and how aggressive your cams are is very important. When you buy cams, you get something like this. So this one tells you exactly the geometry of the cam. So what I did with my build here was that I built a mathematical model for this. Remember, I'm an engineer, really, if you haven't noticed. I built a mathematical model for that. I built a model for how much force the spring has based on where the cam is and how the inertia works. You know, force equals mass times acceleration, and the acceleration is how much this turns, right? So I did that and figured out that if I pre-tension these with 270 newtons, I can rev 8,000 RPM. If I took the same cam and went to the 964 valves and the 964 springs, it will be 7,000. So it makes quite a big difference, this. In my setting, I'm gonna set it up for 8,000 RPM. I don't think I'm gonna use 8,000 RPM, but that's how I'm gonna configure it. Let's build heads. Okay, so head assembly time it is. And I will start with just giving a light little grind of the valves. So what this means is I have something called a grinding paste here. I have the valve, of course, right? And then I have a little stick here with some rubber little things there that holds the valve. I will take some of this grinding paste. I will put it on the valve and I will put it into the cylinder head, and then I will turn here, lift a little bit, turn, lift a little bit, turn. And you can find a million different places on YouTube to find better instructions on how to do this. Since these heads are freshly redone, it's not a great need of doing this, but I am reusing valves that has been sitting in another head, which had the same grind. So I will do this and spend a little bit of time on this. I didn't show you the part with sending the heads away with putting the new valve guides in. That's not something I'm going to do myself, but it involves putting new guides in and then grinding and lapping this surface together with the valves that are going to go into those specific heads. So I finish off the grinding here with the coarse paste, then the fine paste, and then we assemble the heads. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little tool from Proform, right? It's a little pressure tester or tension or force tester, whatever. You put that like that in a vise and you just run it up to, so we have the spring pack here with the titanium retainer and the little bottom washer there. I'm going to just put that like this with the spring tester and I'm going to run it up to what I believe to be 270 Newton. If you buy one of these, they come in different scales. I have the one that is for 700 pounds, which is bigger than what it needs to be. There are smaller, so keep an eye out for that. Then I'm just going to take a caliper and measure exactly where I think I should be. And then I'm going to zero the caliper. So as I assemble this on the head, I should get the same value as this. Okay, so head assembly time. First piece is really to get these little seals on top of the valve guides in there, right? So the seals, they look like this, right? They have a little round thing there, and then there's a metal carrier around them. They're supposed to go on top of here. They are a little bit difficult to get in there. What I have done previously with good success is just use a round socket. So you use the round piece of the socket here, and you put that in there. It fits absolutely perfectly. So then you take the cylinder head like this, and you very gently just knock it in there. Just about like that. So that one sits there perfectly. And I take the other one. Okay, so that's the first step. We got the seals in there. Next step is we're going to start with the intake valve. I'm just going to take the intake valve and put it in there so that it gently passes the seal. So now that we have that in there, we can put the newly measured valve in there. Okay, so let's try this. I have my measured spring pack here. I've measured that I should have 31.5 millimeters from the bottom to the top there to get my 280 newtons, whatever the number was. And now I have to stack up in the bottom using these little washers. They come in different heights. I think I'm gonna need one thick and one small. Let's see. This is really trial and error because all heads look a little bit different due to the valve grinding that they have. So I put that in there, and I take my valve compression tool. This tool is really fantastic. And I compress it until I see the recesses for the retainers. And you can put a little bit of grease on these so they don't fly off if you want, because this is tricky to get these in there. Okay. And here comes the big thing then, to measure. Let's see if we are at 0. And that seems to be very close. Yeah, it's just a little bit too little. So here you have to decide on what your tolerance is going to be. My decision is I'm always going to be high on the pressure. So that means my tolerance is going to be always negative on that one. So I'm going to take this apart, and I'm going to put one of these super thin washers in there. And then I am just about done with this one. So this is how this process goes about. It is a little bit of a trial and error process. It is because you don't know exactly in advance how your seats look. And they do move a little bit because of that. I measure every spring so that I make sure that they're correct. They are always the same. In my very limited experience, at least, they are always the same. But I want to make sure that I don't make a mistake, so I always do that. We're just on the negative side there, which is where I want it to be. That just about sums it up. I do have one little piece left before I can consider these 3 done, and that is filling them up with a little bit of alcohol. So the reason why I'm doing this is a leak test. So these 3 heads next to each other, let them be here for a while. And if I see after a while that one of them has leaked down, that means I have an issue there and I need to just redo that head before I get it back on the engine. Today I showed you a little bit of some of the steps with refurbishing heads. I didn't show you how to put a valve guide in and how to do the seat, and it's simply because I don't know how to do that, so I'm sending that off to someone else. We looked at a little bit how to adjust the springs and a little bit what has an influence when you set your red line and when you try to figure out how the cams and the valves, how they play together. So I tried to explain that at the best of my knowledge and the best of my abilities. If you have a comment or suggestion on what I should do the next time, please feel free to write me a comment. I like that. If you haven't subscribed, you need to do that because all the cool people, they have already subscribed. So go for it. I'm excited to having gotten this done because it means that I'm very close to finalizing the engine so that it can go back into the car, and I'm one step closer to taking this guy to the track. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.